Today, I'm going to be talking about operation standards, and more importantly, how to make them well so that people actually use them. Alright, so first of all, what are operation standards? Operation standards are instructions used in the workplace, or outside of work even. They're also known as work instructions, or sometimes called standard work. They attempt to make a standard way to do a process. They're critical for quality standards, such as ISO, AS9100, and TS 16949, all of which require that you have work instructions or operation standards of some sort. Even if you don't work in manufacturing, you've probably dealt with operation standards before. Have you ever had to assemble furniture? You've used an operation standard, a work instruction, something that told you how to make the piece of furniture. Alright, so this next part might be obvious. Do people enjoy operation standards? No. Even if they are useful, people generally don't enjoy reading operation standards and want to get through them as quickly as possible. Think about when you built that piece of furniture. Were you excited to read the instructions? A lot of people don't even use them at all. So in creating operation standards, I like to stick with the KISS acronym. Keep it simple, silly. Keep it simple, stupid. So how can we make people enjoy reading them? Or if not enjoy, at least get through them easier and pay better attention? Well, I'm going to go over that in more detail on the next slides. But here's some basics. Word things in the most plain language possible. If you are getting technical, then be very specific about what you're talking about. Use tons of great pictures, so not blurry or dark pictures. Use good quality pictures. Color code where appropriate, which is generally all the time. And use graphics as well to help illustrate examples. Alright, so the world is filled with operation standards, work instructions that attempt to help people do something. I generally see two categories of bad operation standards. On the one hand, you have the over-descriptive, dull instruction. These are usually called manuals. These are pretty much useless for newcomers. They're only good as a reference tool for people who already know what they're doing. Very often, they are just text with no useful images. And if they do have images, a lot of times they're very technical pictures that are really hard to decipher. Then the other type of bad operation standard I see a lot is under-detailed nothingness. So just very generic instructions that don't actually tell you how to do the job. Imagine if for some reason you did not know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You weren't familiar with the tools or the materials. And you got an instruction that said, step 1, make the PB&J. That is pretty much useless. But there are a lot of instructions out there that are already like that. Alright, so here is an example of what I think is a pretty good operation standard. This is one I made at work a few years back, and I've made between 500 and 1,000 work instructions of some sort. So you'll notice at the top, you have a section that clearly says, what the part name is, and then for this one, it's a packaging operation standard. Then, of course, it says OPS for operation standard, number. So as part of a quality system, you have to have some sort of indexing system. So every operation standard gets a unique identifier. At the top, too, you'll want to include things like the specific part number, the name it's known by, if those are different. Sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. Whoever issued the report, and that's very important for ownership and authenticity. So that's my name on there. So if anyone had an issue with that, they could come talk to me and get it changed. Then you'll see an approval section as well, which is good to have. Did my boss approve this document? I'm not just out there issuing documents on my own, hopefully. Did someone relevant to the area, relevant to the instruction, approve it? Then you'll also see a health and safety section. Most countries have some sort of safety governing body. So it's important to have health and safety. If you're doing this for a manufacturing environment, you want your employees to be safe. So make sure you put useful things on there. Then if there's any kind of setup you need for the area or pre-instructions, I have them there in container setup. And you'll notice the large image on the bottom left. That's an image that shows what the setup should look like. Then on the right side there, it's a brightly colored table with large numbers and text that clearly let the operator know, the person doing the job, what the specific setup is. Further down on the sheet, And this was an Excel document. I recommend using Excel for all your work instructions and operation standards. So further down on the sheet, I had a what to check section. So this was the quality aspect in it. They had to look at the notches on these parts, and they also had to look at the ends. Notice how the images are very detailed, very bright, and clearly show what I'm calling out. Then at the bottom in yellow, it refers to other quality documents, which themselves have their own names and numbering system. What's good is, after you make a few of these, if this is your job, you can have a template. So once you make a good one that's been improved, you can clear it off, save it as a template, and quickly make another instruction in the future, just with new information and pictures. And many of the pictures can be reused, like container setup. If multiple parts have the same container, you don't have to change that section. Once all the prerequisites are out of the way, I get into the actual steps. Notice how the pictures are large and detailed and focused, how some of the words underneath them are bold, so those are important things people really need to pay attention to. Notice as well that where I say 9 stacks and 8 stacks, it's a very strong, noticeable text. If someone wasn't very comfortable with reading, or just wanted to look at this operation standard quickly, they could learn a lot of the job just by looking at the pictures. Or if they just needed a reminder, they could just glance at it quickly. So here's a separate work instruction that I'm using to illustrate my point. This one has good images as well, but notice on top of the images, a few of them at least, I have graphics as well. I'm specifically calling out certain areas that the employees need to pay attention to. So I'm putting a noticeable yellow box around them. In this example, instead of using an actual picture of a forklift, I'm using just a fun little graphic. Sometimes that gets the message across better than a picture would. And if you notice below it, I'm using color coding. So vice grips match the color of the border around the vice grip picture, and the hammer color, the font color, matches the border around the picture of the hammer. So color coding helps the eyes go quickly to what each tool is. It works well if it's a specific tool you're not familiar with. You see a certain color border and then see it on the actual object. Well, you see it on the picture of the object. Actually, color coding that object in real life would kind of be the next level. In this example, I'm using a combination of pictures with graphics, notice the arrow and the boxes, and a unique kind of text that says on and off. This imagery really helps get the idea across. Even without reading the text, you kind of have an idea of what the instruction is saying. So once you are able to make the operation standards easier to read and visually appealing, there's a few things you need to remember, especially if you're doing this for a living. First, go to the relevant people to learn the job. Don't just sit at your desk and assume you know what's going on out there. There's going to be a lot of little tips and tricks you're not going to pick up unless you actually interview the people doing the job. Review it with them, change it based on what they're saying, review it some more, and then change it again until it's acceptable to both you and the people actually doing the job. And it's important, when you're reviewing it, walk through it word for word as though you knew nothing, as though you were completely new. Because the person using it in the future will be completely new. And oftentimes you see as well, if you're interviewing more experienced people and making work instructions based on what they're saying, they have a tendency to skip a lot of the small things. So if you walk through it word for word, as though you have no idea what you're doing, you might catch a lot of those mistakes. The process can definitely get tiring. I only did it for a few years, but sometimes you do get sick of it. But there's a certain sense of pride as well. When you finally create that very effective and efficient operation standard that is a piece of art in its own sense, you're proud. And there are times it is very enjoyable to put these together. So I'll end on this. There is value in administrating yourself. Early on, it's good to decide the color scheme you want to use for things, and that's going to vary based on your industry. It's important to get others involved as well. Maybe your maintenance always thinks of a certain color meaning something, so use that color with maintenance. See what makes sense for your industry. It is also good to have a set way to display your operation standards. So put them out on the floor, your manufacturing environment or maintenance shop or whatever, where people are actually doing the work. Don't put them in the way of everyone, but make them easily accessible and visible if people need them. It's also good to have a set style for your operation standards, a set verbiage, and a layout for different categories of instructions. This is easy. Once you make a few, you can use those as a template. And again, they will be constantly evolving, continuous improvement, Kaizen style. And most importantly, don't be afraid to change based on what the end user says. You make these instructions based on people who need to learn the job. You will be proud of what you've created, but if it needs to change to work, then it needs to change. So I hope you picked up a few useful tricks when it comes to making operation standards. It's a fun process and you really can get quick and effective at it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments.